Hello and welcome to healthyhouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Continuing on with our terrarium series here, it is the time we've been waiting for, which is to pot up this lovely terrarium. And this terrarium is going to be a fairy terrarium, fairy garden terrarium here. I'm actually author of the book Fairy Gardening, co-author of the book. So here is the spike moss we're going to use, and I had put a little bell in here too when I chose the accessories in the prior video. And my fairy gardening book, autographed copies are available on my website as well, in my store. And then we have this really cute little fairy house, and of course in a fairy garden we need to have a lovely little fairy, so we chose her to match up with the scene. Okay. Now, this is a standard traditional terrarium with a lid. You can see through it, really pretty. I'm going to use this for this scene here. You can see that it is nice and clean. You want to make sure that the terrarium has been cleaned, disinfected if you've used it before with a 9 parts water to 1 part bleach solution. The nice thing about the glass is that you can clean it fairly well with soap and water, not even need to use the bleach a lot of times, and get out anything that might be lingering in there, as opposed to things like plastic. Terrariums, generally I do glass terrariums. After you clean it, you want to let it air dry well and that sort of thing so that it's ready to go. Now for planting. So what you want to do is, there is a procedure here and certain items that go into the aquarium, to the terrarium. And keeping in mind that the terrarium does not have drainage holes. So this isn't your traditional potting up most of your houseplants and making sure they have good drainage. This is creating a very humid microclimate where plants such as the spike moss thrive because they love high humidity and moist conditions. Prior video talked about proper selection of the plants for the terrarium. Okay, so what we want to do first is we are going to put in a 1/4 inch of gravel on the bottom of this guy. Before planting, we're getting the substrate here, what it's going to be growing in, ready. The gravel is for the drainage because, as mentioned, this doesn't have any drainage holes. We do need some drainage. But keeping in mind too, the terrariums are different than other plants, so you can't do this gravel trick with your regular houseplants because they need the quick drainage. This is for plants that want to live in basically like a little mini rainforest. Okay, so we are going to put in a 1/4 inch of gravel. So you want to put it in, eyeball it a little bit, see if it looks like about 1/4 inch. You could measure it if you want to, just to make sure. Shaking it up a little bit. I need some more. So this will give any excess drainage at the root zone, water. This will give any excess water at the root zone a place to go. And remembering that 1/4 inch is not all that much. A little bit more. Okay, so that is good. That looks to me like 1/4 inch, maybe not quite as much on that side, so it looks like I'm using all the gravel that I had. Okay, that I prepared here. Okay, good. Okay, that is perfect. All right, the next thing is a 1/2 inch layer of charcoal. The charcoal will absorb odors, any odors that may build up in the terrarium, so it's important to add that. Will also help to keep things from being too excessively moist. So I'm going to be putting a 1/2 inch of charcoal, and you can get the horticultural charcoal from various various nurseries, various suppliers of garden products. 1/2 inch is quite a bit. So we can do a little bit more. We also do, however, want to make sure we're going to have enough room for the for the planting here. So I'm going to check here. That is about 1/2 inch. Got some of the bigger chunks. Okay. Now we are going to do 1/4 inch of sphagnum moss. And here's some sphagnum moss. We want 1/4 inch of that. So it's going to be a pretty thin layer. Be careful not to breathe this in when you're pouring it. Doing this with little ones, make sure of that. On top of this, we want a 4-inch layer of soil. However, unfortunately, this thing is not going to allow for that much, so we're going to see what happens here. So these sorts of things can happen. You can, that's a good 1/4 inch there. You can, best possible intent, and find out, oh gee, my aquarium, my terrarium is not quite deep enough. So we are going to fill. It's looking like it'll be about 2 inches, so hopefully this is going to work okay. What we have left to work with here. I didn't want to skimp really on the drainage below. I could have gone a little bit less with that, but we'll see what happens. You can mound up because you are going to be putting a lid on here, so I may be getting a little bit closer. Also remember too, I'm only putting one plant in here, so I can mound up on one side where the plant is going to be, and then it can be a lot lower in the front where there's going to be, or wherever I'm going to be putting the accessory. So that is another option to keep in mind. Okay, we got that. So I'm going to take my spike moss here, get up here so you can see a little bit better. And I'm going to take it gently out of the pot. You can take out the little bell for now. And I am going to actually make it a little bit less soil to see if this guy will just snuggle in here very well or not. And it looks like he does want that excess soil here. So sometimes, you know, you may find you need to get a deeper one, or you may find, like I said, that you have to mound up around it. So have to keep an eye on this guy to make sure that the soil stays mounded up around him. The good news is that the watering method that I'm going to show you doesn't make soil run away from the base of the plant like a lot of times what happens when you water regularly with a watering can or under the sink, or but this, you actually water with a turkey baster, with a baster, so that will keep everything intact. So most likely this plant will continue to have its roots nicely covered in this mound. It's kind of cool too having this mound here, because it gives more of a kind of a view here, like the tree on the hill. And then we're going to put in the fairy house, nestle that in as much as possible. So we see the fairy house here, getting that in there. Now our little fairy, I'm going to put her in after I do some. I'm going to put in some marbles to give a nice look. I have a bunch of green ones in here, so I'm going to put in blue. There is not really any blue in that, so I'm not sure about the blue, but there's plenty of white and green ones in here. Let me go ahead and put those in here. Cover it nicely, remembering too that you're going to be seeing this terrarium from all sides, so it's a good idea to make sure that you look at it from all sides as you're working. I'm right now putting green ones in the back here. I think the greens seem to be working out well in terms of color here, the pop of color. You can also put gravel on here. You can also put some green moss, sheet moss in as well. I'm probably not going to do that in this one just because this green is going to clash with this other green, but that is another possibility. I have this big one here. This one, for me, this big marble here, flat marble, really does kind of look like a little pond. So I'm going to have her sitting next to the pond, admiring herself in the pond, the fairy. Okay, and continuing on here, putting lots of marbles to fill in the space left from the soil. You can see in the back I've got the marbles there. I like the dark greens seem to be working the best. I have some here that have a little bit more of a sheen to them, but I like, actually the mixture is good. The light bounces off of some of them more than others. Okay. So I've covered up all the different areas. She's got her pond right in front of the door to the fairy house almost. So let's see, move that a little bit. She can do that. So make sure everything's in there fairly securely. Things are covered well. Okay. So now I'm going to put in our little bell, Tinkerbell. There we go. And then I'm going to wipe away some of the dirt so you can get a better look here. So there's that. You can see that. Looks very cute. Now, watering and maintaining. Okay, so I'm going to show you, you use the turkey baster method here to water occasionally. You want to keep it moist in there, but not a lake in there. So got some in this turkey baster, which is not cooperating really great. It's already somewhat moist in here. You can see I'm focusing my efforts on the plant itself because I really don't need to water the fairy house or anything else. That will stay moist. So I put some water on the spike moss, and now I'm going to put the lid on. Get a really nice view here, what it looks like in there, and if you can see that. So there we have the fairy in there, having a good little time, looking at herself in the pond there. So in terms of maintenance, maintaining this, we need to put this in a bright but indirect light. You wouldn't want to put this in a window where it would heat up too much inside and could burn up the plants. So bright indirect light, full spectrum lighting works well for these guys as well. So that is important to keep in mind. If you're growing a terrarium that has a lid like this one, keep in mind that it will most likely remain moist in there due to condensation. That means that you want to avoid overwatering it. Excess moisture will quickly lead to root rot for the plant. Only water when the terrarium dries up by approximately 50%. When you do water, use a turkey baster like I showed you. Dribble in the water at various locations in the terrarium. Well, basically in this regard, you want it more around the tree, but you could do a few other places just to keep the whole overall condensation going on. Pouring anything in without a turkey baster instead, it just doesn't work, because what happens is you can end up accidentally putting in way too much water, and then you'll end up with over wet conditions. You can also mist is another thing you can do, so you can open it up and you can mist. That is another alternative that you can use. Once it's established and growing, the terrariums don't require much care. You simply trim back the foliage every 1 to 2 months a little bit, especially if it's starting to kind of go against the glass and look a little too full in there. You do want the accessories and things to remain visible. I would fertilize just once a year with an 1/8 strength of a liquid fertilizer. So a fertilizer at 1/8 of the strength. This soil, before it was in, did have a mild amount of fertilizer in it, so that will keep it going for quite a while, because you want the plants to grow very slowly. You don't want them to grow quickly, because then you're pruning a lot and then they end up getting too many roots and then you end up having to repot them. The point is to have a nice little scene in here. You will need to sometimes clean out the sides of this, and so you could just take this, in this case, take this off and rinse it out and clean it up. They do have, there's the air holes there, so that will keep it from getting too much condensation in there. If you feel like it's not getting enough, you can stop those up with something to make it more humid in there. And you want to keep things clean. So to prevent fungus buildup and that will occur when there's rotting leaves, then just remove the rotting leaves as soon as they appear, and you will prevent that from happening and creating any situations indoors in your terrarium. You can take occasionally, you can also take out the accessories and rinse them off if they're starting to look a little bit like they've got a little mildewy growing on or something like that. Usually that won't happen, but if they look a little mossy or a little greener than you'd like to see them better, or if they get a little dirty, then just rinse them off and put them back in again. Very easy to do. And keeping them away from drafty areas is usually a good idea, especially the ones that aren't as well enclosed as this. The nice thing about this one is very well enclosed, so this could be near, say, a heating duct and still be doing okay. But do keep in mind location, especially when it comes to lighting. So that is it on putting together a lovely terrarium. Very fun to look at, very fun to watch it grow, although it will grow slowly, but it's just a really, really fun thing to have in your indoor garden. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video, and please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.